Welcome to Disconnected. I'm starting my videos like this every time because I suppose in a way I want to set the tone of what these are about. These are not about me knowing better or me wanting to comment or sound clever or smart. They are about asking questions. I'm still pretty bad at this, but let's give this a shot. So, I watch Novara Media quite often, and Novara Media, sorry. And I pretty much kind of fall in line with them, if you know what I mean. I'm kind of on their wavelength. I tend to agree with what they talk about. I suppose we're probably of similar minds in most kind of social and economic and political aspects. But I think that there is an opportunity here to, in this video, to not only showcase what is it that I'm actually trying to do with Disconnected, and why there are certain things that might be thought of a little bit harder. Now I'm going to play this video, and I'm going to see if I can keep my wits together for this.
Pay cuts. It's been a tough year for people in poverty struggling to pay their energy bills. And it's been a tough year for anyone unfortunate enough to get sick and to need to use our crumbling NHS. But maybe I'm missing someone. I feel like there's another group of people who are having a really difficult year that we just don't consider enough on this show. That's right. Landlords.
I just feel like I have to say that being a landlord in London is a horrible job, and it's so thankless. I'm a good landlord. I'm a landlord for one property, and my tenant just moved out after living there.
So this is what I think is important to remember. She is the landlord of one property.
I'm a good landlord. I'm a landlord for one property, and my tenant just moved out after living there for 3 years. I gave her a perfect, beautiful, freshly painted, everything in it property. I come back after she's moved out. My furniture is missing. She spray painted in gold my fireplace, pieces of my furniture. Couldn't even bother to put newspaper on the carpet. It's all splotches. And everyone's talking about like London tenants, yeah? And like, oh, poor them. You know, what about poor me? Poor landlord. I have one property. You know, people think, oh, landlords are like, they're fine. You know, we're like Bernie Madoff or something, sitting at home, counting stacks of cash, you know? Actually, that rent I'm making, it's like half of it goes to all the payments you have to make, you know, and all the things you have to do just to please tenants. And then we just get treated so bad. I just don't get it. Like, what's the deal?
The deal is we're annoyed that we're all paying your mortgages. You take half of our income every month to pay your mortgage. You know, you always hear this from, I hardly make any money. All the money I make goes on expenses and repairs. I don't normally believe it anyway. But even if that is the case, if most of your profit goes on repairs, still, in 30 years' time, you're going to have a very valuable house. And guess who will have bought you that house? People who go out to work instead of just waiting for rent to come in at the end of the month. Dahlia, do you think she put her argument persuasively? What about me? What about poor me? What about the landlords?
Oh my God, just awful. Like, first of all, landlordism isn't a job. Like, and if you think it's a job, then why are you so surprised that people are asking you to work for your check? But it's not a job. It is an investment, and investment comes with risk. You aren't entitled to a return on your investment. That's capitalism, baby. That's the system that you're so into. Like, keep up with the program. That's not us making those rules. That's the rules that you are benefiting from. Secondly, it's also not thankless. You get a lot of free money for it, for doing barely anything. And thirdly, obviously, there's this like ridiculously annoying idea of like the critique of landlordism doesn't apply to me because I'm a good landlord. First of all, this landlord is in London, which means that she is probably getting nearly 50% of her renter's paycheck every month. if you are getting 50% of my paycheck every month, you don't get to like get a pat on the back or like to get a nice little round of applause for giving me a decent place to live. Like there's this idea that if you're not letting, if you're not letting the property be infested by vermin, if it's not falling apart, then somehow that means that you're a good person. It's like giving you a dignified place to live is the bare minimum for the amount of free money.
So inherently, there's not really much that you can disagree on here. It is one of those things. Look, she is going to have a place at the end of her mortgage term. Somebody else will have paid for it. But I'm 100% sure that this lady truly is not a bad person. She has made this investment and she probably knows that there's risks involved. And the problem here is not that she's complaining about being a landlord. She's complaining about the tenants. So there's a couple of things I want to try and dissect here. Firstly, the first thing that springs to mind is this criticism about landlords, which is 100% validated, absolutely. But what they're not doing here, which is very common, is that they are not distinguishing between a small business and a big business, between somebody who owns maybe a couple of flats or a couple of houses or maybe one like this woman and somebody who is like Prince Charles owning half of fucking Cornwall or shit like that. But pretty much everybody has to rent from him, and then all the problems that creates. This is a woman who has invested in dare I say, a business, if you like. And she is renting this out. And so she is really, really susceptible to the effects of a bad tenant. So let's say this tenant doesn't pay or ruins the place. There's hardly any way of recovering any of that. So her reasoning is quite valid, saying, look, she's being treated like shit. And anecdotally, absolutely, but I have a few experience in this. One, my sister owned a one-bedroom flat, and when they started having a family, instead of selling the flat, they bought the house. She had more than enough money, and they rented out that flat. Firstly, she struggled really long to actually get that rented out, and secondly, when she did rent it out, the people, weirdly enough, I knew the people that rented it. They kind of worked with me. They fucked that place up. Now, I mean royally. The amount of money that they cost my sister and her husband was insane. They didn't pay their rent for months, which was a big deal. So we were up in Scotland, and at the time, this was, what was this? Maybe about 2010, 2011? I can't remember exactly. The two people that rented both worked. They did have enough money to pay the rent. This wasn't an expensive. I think they were paying about £400, £500 or something like that for the place. So, and I know the jobs that both of them did because they worked where I used to work, and I know exactly what they did. I pretty much know exactly what they earned, never mind. And they just ended up not paying the rent. At the same time, the woman had a horse at a stable, which cost her a lot of money. I mean, so probably that's why they couldn't pay the rent. Then they had dogs. They got themselves 2 dogs. They obviously never took the dogs out because at some point they just picked up and left, and there was piss and shit in every single room, on every carpet, and it was covered. I mean, my sister showed me the photos, and that place was a wreck from top to bottom. Now, I'm not just talking about, paint coming off the walls or maybe nails hammered into walls or wrong paint used or some dribbles of paint on the carpet. No. We're talking about dog shit and dog piss that covered the whole floor, nearly every room. And more importantly, it was there for so long that it soaked into the carpets and it soaked into the floorboards. Now, there was a couple of problems here. Number one was they had no recourse. When they started not paying the rent, there was nothing they could do to get them out. It had to go through all these legal slow. Now, obviously, they're in protection. They are absolutely there for the protection of tenants, so that landowners can't just throw people out willy-nilly, and completely understandable. But when something becomes that desperate, the landlord also doesn't have a way of protecting themselves against financial problems, right? So they couldn't just get them out. They had to wait like 3 months before they can even start a legal process to then, get rid of them. Eventually they just left, which was like a blessing, but at the same time, obviously, like I said, the place was, it was thousands of pounds worth of damage in the place before they could, and so they lost more money than anything. And these stories are not uncommon. There are a lot of these stories. So I can imagine if I own like 100 properties and there's like, 10% of my tenants are terrible, I can absorb that. If I have 1 or 2 or 3 places that I'm renting out, I cannot absorb that. And if I cannot absorb that, it means that I'm going to possibly default on the mortgage that I have on those flats, and I might lose the flat. So I might lose my investment. Because we've got to be clear about this. A small business needs to survive. Small businesses cannot be, and they always are, but they cannot be put under the same bracket as a big business. Small businesses, self-employed and small businesses make up 60 to 70% of most countries' taxable income. That means the country runs on small to medium businesses and the self-employed. And those taxes are the ones that pay for your roads and pay for your NHS, etc., etc., etc. Because the big guys, they find ways around paying taxes. I mean, Navarro Media themselves have this as a topic all the time, and Owen Jones and the economics guy. We're talking about normal people, not people who are trying to become massive moguls and extort renters. And so, also, if I'm paying out, let's say, £500 or £600 on my mortgage for the house that I bought that I'm going to rent out, or the flat that I bought, or whatever, and I want to make a profit on that and have some money extra to be able to be a proper landlord, i.e., have enough money set aside for if the boiler breaks or if there's any sort of issues with the place, to be able to have the cash and to be able to fix those issues that the tenant might have with your property quickly and efficiently, so that you as they say here, to have a decent livable space. Now, to make this clear, if Navarro ever sees this video and wants to come back at me, I am not criticizing what they are criticizing. I'm not criticizing the fact that, they definitely are the winners most of the time. They are the ones that make the money. They're the ones that end up with the house. They are the ones that end up with the equity, the property that they can sell one day. And somebody else who's working is having to pay for it. But the other thing is that I don't think that it is landlords themselves that are to blame for the price hikes. That is the fact that everything is so expensive. So obviously the landlords are reaping all the benefits, but is it really fair to blame them for the price hikes? If their costs go up, they have to put up costs. Like Tesco, if their costs go up, they put up food prices. If the photographer's camera gets more expensive, he has to charge more for his photography business. That's just normal. So I'm not so sure that we should blame the tenants, the landlords themselves, for the horrific prices that they have to pay. That they have to take from their tenants. That is a bigger issue. That is an economics guy channel kind of issues. Where's the money going? Why is everything really getting so expensive? Why is the government not involved? Why do we have austerity? Why do the rich not pay their taxes? Why do we put all our eggs in one basket? So let's say for energy, for example. Why do we outsource everything? Why do we not nationalize certain things? Why does the government allow inflation to go this high and not to put proper policies in place? Because obviously the landlord will want to make money. That is just a normal setup. The unfairness here is, from my personal emotional feeling here, is like, I don't want to be too harsh on the person that has like the odd flat, maybe bought a house or something, because I think that's usually the way it goes down. Like this woman, she's probably somebody who had some cash and thought, you know what, instead of me putting it in a bank where it's not going to get any money, or investing it, which might be dodgy. Maybe what I'll do with my extra income or my extra cash is buy a house, buy a flat, buy a property, because it's kind of like a safer investment. So financially, she was probably thinking that she was doing the right thing. And then obviously she might sit with this extra place and she goes, well, you know what, I can rent it out. Or the other version might be that somebody is in a young career, like I managed to buy a flat in 2000, and if I still had it, I would be renting it out now because I bought a house because I had a family. And so I might just be in that situation where just my life kind of puts me into that position where I'm lucky and I have like an extra place. And what am I going to do with it? I'll rent it out. Somebody else pays my rent for it, pays my mortgage for it. I don't see that as extremely abusive of my situation or power. What is abusive is that it then becomes that all the places are bought up, and really, if we want to start looking at who's to blame for this, it's those people that buy up the masses of properties. It's not the one person that runs maybe one or two houses and rents them out. It is the people that with lots of cash manage to buy up all the assets that we have, that drive up the prices, so that normal people can't buy houses anymore or flats anymore, or buy properties in the likes of London, where the Novara media, most of their people sit, for example. That is really the problem here. This is a sideline, in my opinion, and it is a sideline which it's easy to blame this woman and it's easy to blame the landlords. And obviously they have blame. I'm not going to say they don't. Like I said, I'm trying to make sure that I don't seem to be entirely disagreeing with what they're saying here. But I think that if we want to change, that this is not such an issue anymore, that people who have to rent for a while, who have to rent, are not completely exploited. This is a more global economic problem that we need to solve, where we need to be a little bit more clever about how we decide to run our economies. That's all I really want to say. Thank you very much.